reserves for the Finance and Investment Committee meeting of Vallecitos Water District on Wednesday, August 28th, 2019. We are now in session. So you want to kick this off there?
Yeah, so we have 3 items for you. They're all just for kind of discussion and updates. There's real no action, and I don't think any of these in a short time are going to be going to the board, but just informational for you for the Finance Committee. So I'll turn it over to Wes for the first one. That's to look at the year-end reserves. Now, you get a report every month in the board packet. I think it's the second meeting of the month. You get the reserve report, but we don't always walk you through it, so this may be an opportunity to give a little bit more detail. So, Wes.
Okay, so welcome to the Finance Committee meeting, August 28th, 2019. Here's our committee party page. It just says reserves and reclaimed up there. So today we're going to talk about, first I'm going to go over the June 30th, 2019 reserve summary. We thought it would be a good idea. August 31st, CalPERS will be coming out with their actuarial valuation. When they come out with that valuation, we're going to use their new basis on that to look at paying $8.1 million. And because that number was budgeted and part of our projected reserve balances, we thought it'd be a good idea to present you with an update on what the June 30th actual balances were, so you can see how we were compared to what we budgeted, whether or not we're healthy enough, and not that it's going to change that, but it just give you an update on that.
Just to clarify something Wes said, we're going to take the board direction of pay 8.1 million, but there's different funds, bases they call them, that you can apply it to. And depending which one you apply it to determines whether you're saving the most amount of money. So we're going to take the board direction and apply it in the smartest way possible based on the rate.
So this reserve summary is going to include that $8 million because we still have it.
It won't include it, but it'll show you our starting point before we pay it.
Yeah, because
So we projected the June 30th, 2019 balances in the budget. Those were projections as of like March or April. Now we have the actual balance, so we can see how we were in
So the balance you're going to give me from June 30th does or does not have the $8 million in it?
does not. We didn't.
Where's the $8 million?
It hasn't been paid yet. It'll be paid once we get, so we're getting.
No,
that.
we have it, so.
Oh, so yeah, okay,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
what he's saying. It's
We
in the
have it,
reserves.
Yes, it's in the reserves.
It
That's
won't-
what I want to know.
It won't reflect it having been paid.
Right. and
I'm
that's
very
what I'm
basic.
Okay, it's in there.
So
Yeah.
it's in the balance. It has
So
not
the
come
reserve
out of the-
summary is going to show the $8 million.
Right.
They put it in a hole in the back.
And
It's
Wes,
in there.
In the total, yes.
Wes will point out where that $8 million is when he brings
I
up the
will,
appropriate.
yes.
page.
Okay.
It has not been paid out of the reserves.
Right, but we
It
have
will be
it.
included
Yeah,
in
it's
the,
there.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Magic.
So, okay, so first I'll talk about the replacement reserves. Those are reserves that are affected by the $8.1 million because it comes directly out of those to the water and sewer.
The reason why you don't have a copy of this PowerPoint? You usually give us copies of
I'll
everything.
do it. I can print it out for you.
This makes me think you don't want us to have it.
Well,
Well,
I did put it on a big screen for you to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we can't take that with us. That's
We'll
the
get you a
idea.
copy
We'll
before the
get
end
you
of
a
the
copy,
meeting.
for sure, yeah. I just don't want you plagiarizing my work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after the replacement reserves, I'll go into the capacity reserves. That'll give us an idea of where we are as far as the capacity shortfall is at the end of the year, June 30th, 2019. Then, I disappeared. Let me come back. Right there. Then we'll take a look at the budget comparison. So what we projected versus what our actual balances were, and I'll try to explain any variances there. Although they were projections, so we expect them not to be, exact, but.
Right.
After that, I'm just going to give a little update on our reclaimed water sales. So,
That can be in red.
the reclaimed water stuff.
Yeah.
Purple
No,
pipe.
that's the second, that number 5 on the screen is the second item on this.
Correct. So 1
just
through 4 are the reserves. So that's the first item on the
Oh,
agenda.
gotcha.
And then number 5 here is going to be item number 2, the reclaimed water sales. And number 6, we'll talk about the smart meter pilots that we're looking at right currently. So that's item number 3 on the agenda. Okay, so this slide here shows just a summary of the activity of the reserves during the fiscal year 2019. So first you can see the water replacement, water's on the left, sewer's on the right. So the water reserves started beginning balances June 30th, 2018. Those are the beginning balances and replacement capacity. I won't talk too much about the numbers because I'm going to show you some graphs of them after this, so we don't need to get into too much detail on the numbers. But it starts with the beginning balance plus your revenues that came into reserves, less your distributions, and then that gives you your ending balance as of June 30th, 2019. Now, per our reserve policy, we have to keep 6 months of operating reserves deducted from that balance before we can compare it to the floor and the ceiling. So you can see the $5.7 million for the operating reserves. So the 31.8 and the 8.3, well, it's just the 31.9 actually, is compared to the floor and the ceiling, not the 37.6, just for clarification.
So we have $31 million in reserve
Almost
for
32.
replacement,
Correct.
correct?
Yes.
Okay, for capacity, we're $8 million in the hole.
So we actually have 37.6, but we have to keep
5.7
5.7 for
set
operating
aside.
reserves.
Okay,
So if somebody said, what's in your water replacement reserves, the number is 37.6 million.
okay.
Of which 5.7 is set aside for
So-
operating reserves.
So that's interesting, so when we're looking at our reserves as it pertains to the floor and the ceiling, we're actually looking at the 31.8,
The
but
net.
in reality, we actually do.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
We're looking
I
at
didn't
the
know that.
unrestricted.
Mhm.
Right.
The 5.7 is
So
restricted.
it's actually even, so when we're getting kind of closer to the ceiling, we're actually even better than that because of, we've already pre-planned for this, what is that,
Yes.
6 months you said?
Yes.
But the
Wow.
reserve policy is clear to say which number are you comparing to the floor and
So
ceiling.
it's even better, so when we get that
Yeah.
upper third of the graph, we're actually over.
And what's the, I know it's board policy, get it. What's the basis for operating reserves?
It's 6 months of operating expenses.
So 6 months if everything were to go to
If the
hell.
cash register stopped ringing, nobody was paying water bills for 6
It's
months.
180 days per the reserve policy. So you take that out first.
So
and
what
then
does that have to do with the cash in the bank policy of 300 days that we want to keep?
That's
Totally different.
Yeah, they're different. That's just a rating criteria.
And that's a rating agency thinking how much you should have on hand, which is different than our internal reserve policy.
But when looking at that, they look at the 37.6, because that's our cash balance.
Okay.
Okay, so the reason for taking out the operating reserves and then using the 31.9 to compare to the ceiling and the floor is because the ceiling and the floor are based on capital replacement needs. So you take out the operational needs, and then you get your reserve balance to compare to your capital replacement needs.
And
So we're within $400,000 hitting our ceiling.
Yeah,
Correct.
and you'll see, we'll have a graph on that in a couple of
And
slides.
we put the 5.7 in it,
we're
We're over.
way over.
Right.
I
So-
got another question if we move on. So
Yeah.
the capacity components on both water and wastewater being in negative numbers, that's because we had some very large projects like the 2 tanks in Twin Oaks and Meadowlark and other large projects along the way that we borrowed money on. And so is it not normal to have a negative number in this area, or is that normal? Do most water districts kind of have that negative number because they had big projects at one time and then they're waiting for development to come in and pay for it?
I can't really speak to other districts, but what I can say is the nature of capacity fees and the way that we do it, because it's funded by debt, you spend the money first, you collect it later. The nature of it is that you'll be in the deficit. Plus, you have we're dividing it by 21,600 EUs, which is to build out. So if you're doing it to build out and you have to pay debt over a shorter period of time, you're paying it first, collecting it later. The nature of it puts you in a deficit.
And Mike, we could fix that problem tomorrow by issuing debt. We can go out and issue $8.3 million of debt on the water side, and that number would look like zero, but then the number 2 above that, the debt service, which is now 2.1 million, would go up, because now you have this big debt. So you're not really fixing the problem by issuing debt. Mr. Scaglione would have you believe that, oh, you should be issuing debt and you wouldn't have this problem. Well, you'd fix one problem and create another. So that with the debt service, instead of 2.1 million, it may go up to 3.2. So that every year you're incurring more debt and it's driving you down negatives.
So you'll be paying interest on that debt too.
Right.
Now, that build-up number that you just used, 21.
That was last rate model.
Right, well, that's you just used that. We've changed that to 8,000.
8,400 for a portion of our capacity fee.
Based on what? Why did it go from 21 to 8,000?
Because we're looking at, and Mike actually has more information on this than I do, but we're looking at the projects and their expected life. So we're saying, okay, some projects are for 20 years, so they'll serve 8,400 EUs. Other projects are until build out, which our current build out per Sandag is 27,600, I believe. So we have certain projects like the Interceptor, the land outfall, that are until build out, so they're being divided by the 27,600 still. So we're gonna be collecting EDUs, we have to get 27,600 EDUs until, before that, those are actually paid. So we're gonna spend that money, we're not gonna get it back until we've collected 27,600 EDUs.
Which could be 150 years from now.
So there's a built-in delay, a timing delay, a lag in when we collect our EDUs, if ever. so there's a constant deficit.
And that's part of the argument, because the attorneys say that you have to charge, you have to spread it over all the development that will benefit from that improvement. And so we're saying, so it may take 150 years to get that revenue, even though we have to pay it off, even if we issue debt, we have to pay it off in 25 years, but we don't collect it until maybe 150 years.
Realistically, you're not looking more than 50 years for build-out. Realistically, I mean, it could be 3,000 years, but
Right.
let's look at the reality of it.
The amount of remaining development goes down as time goes on. People
Because
build
it's
their-
getting built, and
Yeah.
you're getting the money, you're
Right.
recouping the money
Yeah.
for it.
So that last home may be 150 years out, but the majority will probably be, you're right, probably 50 years.
And with the city looking at increasing density, that's gonna happen faster. Because they do want to increase.
Yeah, how do you guys take into account, let's say there was a part of San Marcos that was traditionally, light industrial, and it got rezoned to the city, and it became residential at some point, and so they tore down all the light industrial buildings, and they built, residential units. Do they still pay, like, is it just basically treated as like blanket open land? And now it's new customers, and they pay fees on those units, or do you subtract what the previous land use had paid, or how does that work?
That's a good question. That's a very good question.
It's gonna probably happen eventually in San Marcos,
That's a
right?
Rob Scholl question, so I don't know how the master plan deals with redevelopment, that's what you're talking
Yeah.
about. So I know we look at current development, proposed new development, but how it factors in redevelopment, it would probably all depend on the city's zoning. So if the city had like single-family residential and it's built, and then the city came in and rezoned it for multifamily, high-density housing, the master plan should reflect that and said, hey, at some point in time, they're gonna have high-rises there, and we're gonna need more, we're gonna need bigger sewers, more water and all that stuff, and it would go in there.
Problem is you don't capture that because those zoning changes aren't made until the developer's ready to build. I mean, it's not made until that point. That whole downtown area now, which is getting massive apartments going in there.
Yeah,
That was all light industrial, and it's all still zoned light industrial. We know it's not gonna be light industrial, but the developer hasn't come forward with the plan. I mean, they have the
Yeah.
plans, but they haven't moved forward with them.
So I do
So
know.
the city hasn't recognized it.
I do know when they come in for a TI, which is an extreme redevelopment, but when they come in for a tenant improvement, and they've already paid 2.5 EDUs, and it's now something that's gonna be using a lot more water, and it needs 4 EDUs, they only pay the difference, the 1.5.
Okay.
So we do take into account what's already allocated to that either parcel, meter, property, and then have them pay the difference.
But there's
Yeah.
also gonna be a quantitative jump, I would think, in sewer. Quantitative, I mean, if you're going from, an acre of industrial and it's light industrial, now you're going to 500 homes.
yep.
And they would do that calculation,
Huge.
and if they needed 500 EDUs and they paid 10 EDUs, they pay the difference.
Yeah, and your question, Director Martin, about the timing, we can get caught on that timing. If all along this developer's sitting on industrial zone, and then he comes in with his development approvals and a change in land use,
Right.
and then he hurries up and pays his fee before we do our next master plan, yeah, we don't capture all those things.
And that's problematic because there's a bunch
Yeah.
coming down the pipe right now.
But if we see it coming, we can do a kind of an update to our master plan and new fee study. We can say, hey, we know that's gonna change, the city told us somebody's proposing that, we're gonna get that in place before they actually pay their development fees.
Is it a potential, a possibility that we put a moratorium on paying development fees up front? There's no benefit to us.
When you say upfront, what do you mean?
Well, they pay the development fees upon,
Occupancy, so,
the occupancy now.
yeah, well, that's what the board wanted years ago. It used to be upon approval.
Right,
And the BIA said, hey, the system doesn't really see the impacts until people are in there flushing toilets and turning and taking showers.
Right.
So can we defer the payment until occupancy? And the district approved that, so now they go as late as possible.
Right.
We could move that forward, we could say, no, we're gonna go back to the way early. I think most agencies
No.
take it up front, not at the back.
most take it up front, but I don't mind if we're taking it, but we need to do something to charge them the right amount rather than sneaking in underneath.
Yeah.
Because that's what they're doing.
Yeah, well, see, so when they delay it till occupancy, they run the risk of the fee increasing. So they pay the fee that's in place at the time they pay it. They don't get grandfathered. They don't say, hey, my project got approved here, so I'm locked into this, even if I pay it 2 years
But
later.
that fee that's in place is based on their project?
Yes.
Okay, so we can capture it.
Well, it's based on their project and the fee schedule that's in place at that time. So if their project is 10 EDUs, they're gonna pay 10 times whatever the EDU approved is.
Okay, but if the project is light industrial, and which is brought up, and suddenly it's going apartments, that's 500 units, we're not charging enough.
We're charging the number of units, we're not charging light industrial.
Right, but we're not charging enough per unit to capture what all their fees should really be.
Well, I think we would, unless
Okay.
their project is so big that we have to build more stuff. But if they're not paying it the light industrial density, they're paying it their heavy usage,
Okay.
heavy residential and
At today's numbers.
At today's numbers.
So right now, if some of those were to show up at the door, knock on your door tomorrow, we'd be getting shortchanged, and we'd be dumping it on the next developer.
And there's always that risk, yeah.
That's a
So-
risk for us.
Well, but if I'm not sure exactly what your question is, but if somebody came in and said, I wanna pay for my light industrial project, and we took his money, and then he changed it into a multi-story residential, he would not get credit for that. We would get,
Okay.
there would be a shortage of fees at that point in time.
But because we haven't changed our fees in 7 or 8 years, our fees are too low right now.
Well, yeah, and that's part of what's leading to that $8.3 million
Right.
Capacity.
So we're
shortage.
trying to get to that as quickly as possible, not keep pushing it back.
Right. Right. Message received.
We're pushing it back.
Different topic though,
Yeah.
actually. So, so we'll be talking about this a lot tomorrow night, probably on the capacity fees. So, the wastewater side, you've got the beginning balance of June 30th, 2018, plus the revenues that came in, which includes the capacity fees and the capacity fund. Then you've got your distributions, that gets you to your ending balance at June 30th, 2019. One thing to note there is that we do have rate stabilization as of June 30th, 2019, $4.9 million in the sewer replacement fund. However, with the increasing cost of replacing assets and the addition of new assets, and also with the PERS payment, we'll be reducing the amount in the replacement fund, so that is below the ceiling in future years.
And what rate stabilization means is that our ending balance was over our ceiling. So if you look at that one, the ending balance for sewer was 58.7 million, and our ceiling was 48.
47.3.
Right.
So even after deducting the operating reserves of the 6.5,
We were still
we're
over.
still above the ceiling.
Yeah.
And that's how you calculate your rate stabilization.
Right.
So
So
where,
sewer's
so
helping.
that's almost $5 million. How's, what impact is that gonna have on the rates?
It helps to ensure that I don't say ensure, we look at that in figuring out whether we want to increase rates or whether we need to increase rates using the revenue requirement. And because we have that there, we more than likely, hopefully won't have to increase rates, so it reduces the chances that we have to because it's in that balance.
And in the sewer fund, I don't think we've changed the rates for
3 years.
4 years, 3 or 4 years.
And your crystal ball says it looks like it'll be the same?
For sewer,
For sewer,
I think sewer will be good.
probably.
And for water, we're gonna drop the price because we weren't getting all that desal.
As soon as we get that refund check from the water authority, we'll
Right on.
factor
Yeah.
that in.
And Raftelis will be telling you how that's gonna work.
I don't notice over on the other side that rate stabilization on water, why is that?
We're not above the ceiling.
Correct.
That's the only reason. So if you look
But-
at that reserve balance, it wasn't above the ceiling.
They're 400,000 underneath the ceiling.
Yeah.
The ceiling, which is like you could be kind of like in the middle. It'd be just
Yeah,
fine.
we don't have to be at the ceiling.
Well, and that's,
So we'll be talking about more of that in just a minute too.
Yeah.
So
Hold
now-
that thought.
Now I'm gonna go into the
Uh,
graphical
So,
representation.
so total between the both of them, 95, 96 million.
yeah. And that's, if you've seen any of Tom Scaglione's
Yeah,
correspondence,
yeah.
that's the number, that's what he gets. He adds the ending balance lines for both water and sewer, and he says you're sitting on 95 plus million, 96.4, I think is the number he puts.
Lot of money.
And he's right. Technically, he's right.
But it's
But
within
now
our
it's
reserve,
spent.
but it's within our reserve limits per our reserve policy.
It's not
above the
spent, it's
Okay.
earmarked for things.
It's within our reserve policy. Is our reserve policy spot on, or is that something everyone differs?
No,
They all-
we all differ based on needs, based on the value of your assets, your replacement needs, so on and so forth. I've talked with our financial advisors on several occasions, and we are both in agreement that our reserve policy is sound. However, and this is what I was gonna say in a minute, we have looked at areas where we might wanna decide to say, set a reserve limit. Instead of having just the floor and the ceiling, we might wanna say, we should be at 75% of the ceiling, and that's our target level.
Right.
If we set a target level, then that can give us more of a goal.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
that's-
you can have the floor and ceiling, but we should manage it to be somewhere in the, whatever that target level is, 50,
Exactly.
60, 70%.
Yep.
And that would mean, you know, when, like later this year, if we're talking about rates going forward, well, this is an opportunity to manage that back down to where it should be a more reasonable target.
Yeah, and my recommendation is the target would be a range, not a number. So we may wanna say the target is between 70 and 80%. So if you're way up at 100, you don't wanna have to get to 75, but if you can get down close to that, and same thing if you're below, to, you know, you need to get up within a range. So. But and that's something that will be coming forward to the finance committee and then the board for, the reserve policy revisions.
So, the next slide shows this is a summary of both the water and wastewater replacement reserve balances as compared to the floor and the ceiling. So this is combining the two. And as you can see, over the last 6 years, we've been above the floor, but still below the ceiling, so within our reserve policy limits. Our total reserve balance as of June 30, 2019 was $79.2 million. Keep in mind that's less the operating reserves. Compared to last year, it was $72.4 million in June 30, 2018.
So the biggest driver on the reserve ceiling is what it's gonna cost for the future replacements. In the policy, and I can't remember if water or sewer, but it says, for the next 10 years, how much money do you need to replace your infrastructure, replacement projects only, for the next 10 years? And that drives the ceiling. As the agency gets bigger and we have more infrastructure in place, that drives the number up. Inflation costs each project to cost more, so that's why you're gonna see this. It's normal to see that go up all the time. It's gonna go up forever. The floor and ceiling will go up forever.
Aging infrastructure too is a big driver of
Yeah.
that. So as our infrastructure gets older, we have more and more, and it costs more to replace it. So it's natural to see it go up like that
Right.
because we have to replace more. And the policy states 10 years for water and 8 years for sewer.
But where the blue bar is in relation to the green bar and the red bar, that's the policy discussion.
Correct.
So we've increased $7 million in our total water and sewer balance between last year and this year.
Correct.
And that's $7 million or $7 million that's gonna go to PERS.
Yeah,
You could say it that way, yes.
yeah, it's close.
Yes, because we
Yeah.
will be sending $8.1 million out of that reserve to PERS.
So we'll be in the same position this year as we were last year.
Right, you'll roll the
basically.
clock back a year, basically,
Right.
where you.
But in a much better spot.
But we're
from a
in a
business
pretty good
standpoint.
position.
Yeah, and when we get that August 31st timeframe, when we get the new actuarial report and we figure out where to put the basis, we'll be coming back to you and saying, here's where we spent it, and here's the impact on the reserves. So you'll know.
It really is amazing because just in late 2016, October-ish, there was a news article that was being pushed around, and Tom was quoted throughout the entire article saying that we were not charging enough, and that we were charging our ratepayers less than what we were paying for the water, if you remember
Right.
that.
Yep.
And so, talk about
Yeah.
saying one thing one day and something else the next. Pretty
Yep.
amazing.
Okay, so on to the next, and this is where I was gonna talk about the target levels and the PERS payments, but you covered the PERS payments for me, and we already covered the target levels, so you took my notes away from
Yeah,
me.
took care of that.
Took care of that. So this is just a breakout of the water and wastewater. It's pretty much the same slide, just in the two funds, the water and the wastewater. You can see both of them are pushing up against the ceiling, but both are within the ceiling, except for wastewater here, we've taken out the rate stabilization, otherwise you would see this above the ceiling. So now,
But on both of these, you just said we should probably be setting somewhere between 75 and 80%.
depending on what we do.
Should be the goal of what we're going for.
And that'll be something we discuss with the committee, with our financial
Right.
advisors, and setting that.
And which financial advisor is this you talk to? Have they been cleared by Jim to know what he's talking about, because Jim doesn't?
Well, they are the experts, it's, our experts that we relied upon, we
Who are
contracted
they?
them.
Is
as our-
Fieldman Rollout?
Feldman and Rollout.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And
Robert
it's-
Core,
Laura,
Laura.
what is the last name?
Carpenter.
Laura
Carpenter.
Carpenter.
And Gilpin probably won't have a problem with that.
He hasn't said anything yet.
I don't think so.
I am gonna ask Mr. Gilpin some questions tomorrow night.
So this slide shows our capacity reserves, and I've plugged in the numbers here so you can see that our reserves, the shortfall is actually making progress in the right direction. So from 2018 to 2019, we collected, oh, there we go, I should have had another, I had another one, no, I guess not. Okay, so I just wanted to say that we collected $8.9 million in capacity fees in 2019 versus 6.4 in 2018, so it was an additional 2.4. Most of that has to do with timing, when projects are completed when we collect the capacity fees. So this year, we just happened to collect $2.5 million more in capacity fees and have $1.5 million less in distributions. So our shortfall has actually changed or decreased by $1.4 million from 2018 to 2019. So for sewer, you can see it went down from $6.8 million shortfall to $6.3 million.
When did the shortfall change? When did the shortfall take place? From what period to what period?
We really incurred the shortfall in about 2008 is when it started.
2008?
Yes.
That's important.
That is important.
Do we have a breakdown as to, I mean,
Yes. I have every reserve report going back to 2004 in detail.
will we have that for tomorrow night, showing
Do we
the
need it?
shortfall? We will need it, yeah, I think so. We need to combat the enemy. Sorry. Tom was the CFO, he was the guy in charge. And if it started in 2008, we need to call him out on it.
So what my opinion, and this is my opinion, is that our current capacity model is sound. It makes financial sense and it works, based on even what our attorneys have told us today via email. I think once we get Raftellus in here, they will say exactly what I just said. My opinion, again, they could come in and say, Wes doesn't know what he's talking about. I have a feeling they're gonna come in and say, based on the development fees, this is a sound financial model, and your capacity fees as projected and calculated by Mike and myself, Glenn, James, over the multiple meetings we've had, are good. And I think we'll get their opinion, their professional opinion, their expert opinion, will validate that.
I think you're gonna be 100% correct on this, you and your team are gonna be correct, I have no doubt you're gonna be correct, full faith in you. What I'm saying is it's important for us to show that 2008 the shortfall began. 2009, 2010, 2011, all before Glenn and you were here.
Yeah, but and I don't like to really hit on the past so much. And as
I know you don't, but I do.
Well, and as I mentioned too, is
I point fingers a lot, you may notice?
so really what you'd have to, I think you'd have to say is that once you started collecting capacity fees and building capacity projects, there probably was a shortfall, right? Because it's the nature of the beast as far as capacity fees go. You start building, you spend the money, you collect it later, there's gonna be a deficit, or shortfall. So that really being a bad thing or focusing on that, I don't think it accomplishes what we want to accomplish through the capacity fee model.
And I agree going forward, I'm just saying we're being attacked for the past.
And I say let them shoot their guns, they're missing the target.
And I'll tell you what if Tom were to be there tomorrow, what he'd say is, he recommended that the board issue debt, and the board didn't listen to him.
In 2008, 2009, 2010.
That he said that repeatedly, that nobody listened, poor me, and no one listened to me.
Well, don't believe them, sorry,
Yeah.
I mean,
So,
That is a temporary Band-Aid.
There was
on
a
this.
trust
It's
issue.
not really gonna solve the issue.
I know, but it's just important for us to have it.
his main thing, and what he hammers on, is he links the capacity shortfall with our reserves. And what he's saying is, you're overcharging your current ratepayers in order to subsidize this, and it's
Right.
not right. Our reserve level says your reserve should be up here, and that's plenty high to cover this deficit. It's not a permanent solution, and we're gonna bring in enough revenue over time to do away with that deficit, so there'll be no internal borrowing. We're not really lending the money, but it's kinda covering it.
Right.
So, but his
Well-
argument makes sense to a common person. I'm being charged too much, because they wanna believe it, that they're being charged too much to pay for somebody else.
Right.
If
And-
our combined reserve levels were to fall below the floor, that would trigger a rate increase because we have to keep it at
Keep
the
it up
floor.
there, sure.
But because we're closer
Yeah.
to the ceiling, it hasn't triggered a rate increase and it hasn't affected our ratepayers.
Right. So he has the potential to be right, but he's not right at this point in time.
Right.
Right.
So these are the capacity reserves. We have seen a shortfall recovery over the last year. Moving on, this is our budget comparison. So looking at the top line is the actual levels for the June 30th, 2019 reserve report. So you can see our replacement capacity for water and sewer. And starting with the water, the replacement is actually $3.5 million higher than we projected. Most of that is due to the fact that we projected water purchases to be a little bit lower, so, or to be higher. So our actual costs for water were lower than we expected, so we have an additional $3.5 million, which is a good thing, because we have more in reserves. Capacity, it's pretty much spot on, it's $338,000 to where we projected. So you have to keep in mind, these projections we were at March or April, and we said how much revenue do we think we're gonna bring in the next few months, and how much do we think we're gonna spend on projects in the next few months. So, and that also had projections for how much operations do we think we're gonna have coming into reserves in the next few months. So it's those three factors really. So looking at the sewer replacement, the reserves are actually $2.2 million higher. Most of that has to do with projects that we had projected to be spent over those 3 or 4 months, and they weren't spent. So we have $2.2 million more. It'll probably happen in this fiscal year. Looking at capacity of $571,000, actually an increase in the shortfall, and that's a result of we'll call it an error that was made. We overlooked the debt service payment in projecting for the capacity, so I'll take responsibility for that. So that being said, that's how we compare. So overall, we're actually healthier than we thought we were going to be. So in making the $8.1 million, I don't see any concerns as far as the board goes.
Cool.
If there are no other questions, I can move on to, I'll talk about reclaimed water sales now.
So that'll be item 2 on the
Yeah,
agenda.
and we can, and I don't know, this, first off, this has been, I always learn better in these smaller groups than when we're like on the, behind the dais and everything like that. So this is definitely helpful. But everything that I've heard, and maybe there's some more information to come, but I don't see us having to go through a 218 this year. I think there's plenty, we're in a good spot, so we can talk about it more later, but I think we're good. The whole thing's steady, and leave things as is for another year or two.
So we're in the beginning stages of starting down the cost of service study process, and through that process, we can look at the revenue requirements and what would happen if we did not raise rates. If we kept rates flat, then the cost of service study would tell you how hard you would hit your reserves. And you could do that.
Right.
You could even decrease rates, but it would be a huge hit to your reserves.
Sure.
So I think, and I always think of it as bookends. One bookend is don't raise rates at all, and the other is what would it take to get your reserves fully funded and cover all your costs and everything, and then somewhere in between is usually where you'll set the rates.
So 2 major factors we need to talk about before we say something like that too would be, we need to look at where the reserves are at after we pay the $8.1 million. So that'd be the first thing. The second thing also is to remember that we have to forecast for future expenditures, which could, based on the budget, may have increased from, this is looking at last year, this is looking at 2019 actuals, right? So we have 2020 expenditures that are budgeted for and have been approved to be spent. So we have to cover those expenditures. So those are 2 major things we want to consider, and we will in doing the cost of service study. And you'll be kept up to date while we're doing the cost of service study, so any considerations will be brought to the committee anyway, so, but I just want to let you know.
And also with with the rate study too, we're looking 5 years out.
Yeah.
So, for example, I'm just making up numbers. If the rate's $4 per unit now, and in 5 years we say it needs to be $5 a unit, you don't want to go 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 5. That's when the rate smoothing comes in. So even if you might not need a rate increase this year, we kind of still look at it so that it goes like this rather than an L. So all that will be taken
Makes
care of
sense.
when we do
Makes
the Prop 218. Now the rate could be lower than what we say. Like if it said it needed to be 420, you could do it 410, somewhere in between there. So just kind of always makes sense to kind of smooth it a little bit.
Okay, so reclaimed water sales. So this is just an update. I'm not going to give a lot of numbers. There will be no graphs or anything like that. It's just one slide here. I just wanted to give the committee some information as to what we've been through and what's happened so far and where we're going. So as you know, hopefully you know, staff has had several meetings in looking at the reclaimed rate model. It's been a little while since it's been updated, so we decided to take a look at it, make sure that we're covering all of our operating and capital costs for reclaim.
How long has it been updated?
That's before I was here.
Yeah, it's
I
been a
know.
while.
Yeah.
It's like I've been doing the same model since I got here. I think the contract was written in 2001. And we've done some updates, so I want to say 2009 for capital. So it's been a while. So we looked at the rate model, we looked at the rate model that was being established prior to the transition, and we pretty much scrapped that and came up with our own rate model. And we actually met with Carlsbad on 2 occasions and Leeuwenhoek once, and talked to them about our proposal as far as covering our costs. Nothing has been set in stone or really decided, but in conversations with Carlsbad and looking at the contract, we can collect up to 75% of the wholesale cost of potable water for Carlsbad, for example. I believe the same caveats in Leeuwenhoek's contract. So we can't collect more than that anyway per contract. So in looking at our rate model and plugging that in as our ceiling as far as what we can collect, the results of that ended up being, first, let me say that in 2018, we collected about $665 an acre foot in reclaimed water sales, which equated to $1.8 million from Carlsbad and Leeuwenhoek combined. That did cover our operational costs for reclaim and a portion of our capital, but not our entire capital costs for reclaim. In looking at the new model, plugging it in through June, we are estimating about $1,285 per acre foot. So about double what we were collecting before. And that'll equate to about $2.9 million in reclaimed water sales, and that will cover the full cost of our operations and capital costs.
So, potential results.
Well, because we haven't come,
Yeah.
we're in talks of developing a new contract and whether or not we can, the timing of charging this. From what we've gathered in meeting with Carlsbad, they are in agreement that we can charge up to 75% of the wholesale cost, and they're our major reclaimed water
So-
customer.
So again, all of this started taking place a long time ago, but with the former leadership within our finance department, why were we not capturing closer to the 1285? I mean, that's a significant difference. If it was 725 or something, I might,
Yeah, it's a huge
but
difference.
that's like, we've been giving them a 50% discount. How did that, I mean,
Because our past CFO was a great guy.
Yeah.
Didn't you hear the guy? He's a great guy.
I'm just gonna say that we're taking action now and getting things done, and that's how this resulted.
Yeah.
Boy, what a good line.
Now, one thing that Mr. Scaglione has said recently is that he's accusing us of not doing anything to address this issue, and he just says it out of ignorance, because he doesn't know what we've been doing. We don't,
Right.
I don't call him and tell him, hey, Tom, today I talked to Carlsbad and I talked to Leeuwenhoek. So if he says that, he's wrong. We have been negotiating. We think we've reached a good number. We're not there yet. Nobody's signed an amendment or a new agreement, but we're confident that we'll get close to that number.
was this a board decision to go to 665, or because the board decision was 75% of the wholesale cost?
The contract says not to exceed 75%. It doesn't say it shall be 75%. It says you can recover your operating and capital costs, but not to exceed 75%. So it places an upper limit. We think with the way we're calculating it, it actually exceeds that 75%, so we'll be capped, and I think that's why Wes used the 75% for the calculation purposes.
But is your gut feeling pretty good? They're gonna go?
I think so. Now, Wes alluded to this. Carlsbad says, yeah, interimly we'll agree to that, but we want to revisit the whole contract. There's other things. They have there's some squabbling between Leeuwenhoek and Carlsbad in terms of who has rights to how much water in Mar Reservoir, and they just think that there's a better way to strike the agreement.
Okay.
We came up with a revised operating agreement that we thought addressed that was outside of the purchase agreement. They seem to have some outstanding issues, so I said, okay, we'll do that. But just like this cap fee, I don't wanna keep kicking the can. Let's start charging the right rate. Meanwhile, we'll be working on an agreement, a new agreement or an amendment, however you wanna do it.
So it was Carlsbad that pointed out the 75% of wholesale cost of water and has been providing us with their wholesale cost of water and 75%. So I've been using that to calculate the current.
Yeah.
So the other 25%, I'm assuming was supposed to be a savings that we're getting, our customers are getting, because we're not sending everything to,
Encina.
Encina. And we're saying, is that the idea? 'Cause my thought, not being part of the water, but I always heard was, it pays for itself, and it's like, well, right there, it only pays 75%, unless we have a savings of 25%.
That doesn't mean we're only recapturing 75% of our costs.
Right.
Hopefully, we're recapturing 100% of our costs, but those costs can't be more than 75% of what it would otherwise cost to get water.
Oh,
So what they're saying is if recycled water wasn't in existence, they'd have to go buy water from the water authority and bring it in. since it's a lower quality of water, they don't think it should be more than 75% of that other supply
that's
of
fair.
water. So that's reasonable, and that's pretty, I wouldn't say industry standard, but it's not uncommon to be some fixed percentage of your alternative water
Okay,
supply
okay.
costs.
But we're thinking that 75% will cover as well as our debt service, because I know
Yeah,
that rebuild, or the second thing they did a few years ago, cost a fortune.
the expansion of Meadowlark.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
and
was
that's in
huge
there.
cost.
And that's one of the things that was missing from the previous methodology in recovering the capital.
Yeah, a little thing like that was missing.
And that was huge, I heard. And I heard that was
Yeah.
one of the problems.
It's
Yes.
a big number. So most of the meeting conversations we had to explain to them why the capital component went up so high. The agreement is clear. The agreement says that we can recapture our capital costs. But however it was calculated, some exhibit that was put in the initial agreement didn't do it properly, but that was before the plant was even up and running. It just never got revised, and that's what we're doing right now.
And the
So again, previous management.
previous methodology was also based on a previous
methodology.
financial system.
Yeah.
It's,
Like, Mike,
So if
little
this,
sidestep, a little.
so if this
It's
works,
true.
you'll see the difference. We think we'll be bringing in an extra $1.1 million, the difference between
That's awesome.
2.9 and 1.8.
That's fantastic.
And that'll all be, and I guess we'd have to figure out, that's probably on the wastewater side of things, or,
yes,
because
yes.
this is all avoided cost for sewer treatment,
Yeah.
so it would probably
Yeah.
benefit the sewer side of the house, not the water side of the
Yeah,
house.
this is all sewer, it's all 250.
It benefits the house.
So just so you know, when
That's
I say
right.
previous methodology, I'm not sidestepping or dancing. We started our evaluation by saying, how are we calculating reclaimed water
Now,
sales?
no,
And we said, okay, how's it working? We tried to understand it, and we said, well, this doesn't make sense because it's from an old financial system.
I know you weren't saying, but I'm saying previous management, you say previous
Methodology.
methodology. That's the difference I'm talking about. It's good the way you do it.
We
but-
did inherit that previous methodology,
Yeah.
that's true.
Yeah.
What a nightmare.
So that would be good news, an extra $1.1
That,
million,
if
whether it
we
goes
get
towards
it-
PERS or
Do we know if
keeping
that'll
rates
happen,
down.
or when it, to
Yeah, so
expect
right
it?
now,
It's
tell me,
budgeted. So we bill, sorry, I don't wanna
Okay.
interrupt. We bill reclaimed water sales based on the approved budget. So the approved budget includes this. The capital recovery is a little bit less than actual, but we true it up at the end of the year based on our actual. So if Carlsbad agrees to 75% of the wholesale cost of water, we'll bill them based on our budget, which is still a lot more than last year's. It's at $2.5 million, I believe. Looks like it's probably been closer to 2.9. When we get to the end of the fiscal year, we say, okay, it's actually 2.9, you guys owe us $400,000. That's part of the contract, is that true up, which happens in November after the end of the fiscal year.
And most of Carlsbad is resold, or do they use it themselves?
they use it themselves in their system.
I thought the golf course used it, and those kind of things that pay for it.
Well, what do you mean?
Because
They use it to their customers.
Right,
The
but
golf
so-
course is
so
the
it's
customer.
resale.
Right.
So they're
that's right.
middlemen.
Yeah, so we're like the wholesaler to them, and they're the retailer.
So they're just gonna pass this on.
Sure, yeah. Which, and that's why we have to be reasonable, because we can't change these prices overnight, and they've already done their cost of service study and set their rates and the
Right.
customers, so they can't, they're gonna say, hey, where are we gonna come up with that $1.1 million?
Right.
So it's reasonable to give them time to adjust their rates to reflect the increased cost.
We think that'll happen by the end of the year?
Well, like what I said, we're gonna be charging them this year, and then at some point in time, they're gonna complain and say, hey, wait a minute, we didn't think it was coming this quick, and there may be some negotiations in there,
I think we've already sent the July invoice.
Yeah.
I don't know if we've collected the payment on it.
yeah, so that'll be the first one at the new rate, so
Yeah.
Well, fantastic.
it's
Thank
like you love
for
that new car until you have to make the first payment.
Yeah.
you know.
Then it has a couple of creaks.
Yeah, so-
That's great.
So
Well,
that's the
great
update on
news.
reclaimed water sales.
Great news, thank you.
Good job.
So the next topic is going to be the smart meter pilots. There are two pilots that we're looking into currently. One of them, I believe, Director Martin, you may know about. Did you meet Dan Naveau? Were you one of the two, or was it you?
I think
Director
I met with somebody.
Yeah,
yeah,
it was
it
you,
was
actually, yeah.
Director Snella and Director Hernandez, yeah.
So yeah, Dan Naveau actually contacted Glenn and myself a while ago. We met with him, then we had subsequent meetings with him, two other members of Capstone Meters, including the president and CEO, Scott Williams, I believe his name
Dan's
is.
basically a sales rep, for lack of a better
for
term.
for this region.
Yeah.
And I believe Scott's in Texas. So they have a smart meter that's actually web-based for the most part, so their platform.
question.
Yeah.
Didn't we just start installing these Pearl meters?
Omnis and iPros, but those are just AMR meters. They're AMI compatible, but we don't have an AMI system.
AMR means you have to drive by it to collect the signal. So you-
Automated meter reading.
Well, why are we putting those in?
Because we had to replace old meters that are failing, or new construction, so we put these new meters in.
And most of them are warranted. So we have an agreement with Census through, it's a warranty recovery. When we did the AMR conversion, and I wasn't involved in all the details, so I don't have all the information.
The old
It didn't go so
mythology.
well. So the conversion from the manual reads to the AMRs didn't go so well with Census. So we ended up, there was a lawsuit, and we ended up getting an agreement, and the settlement included us getting like 490 meters per year as replacements. So we've been doing that for, I don't even know how long it's been.
So what
Do
Wes
we
said,
get the meter as well as the installation costs?
No, we just get the meters.
so our folks do the, swapping out a meter is not that not that labor intensive.
But I guess what we're saying is those, are they Pearl meters? Why did I get that name?
iPearls.
iPearl meters that we got
Yep, and Omnis.
and Omni during that time span in which you guys weren't here, were bad.
Well, we're still getting, correct, when we first did the installation, a lot of them were bad. We had a lot of failures, a lot of warranty needs, and it became, and again, I'm just saying what I've heard, it's hearsay.
I know, huh?
But I know there was a lawsuit, and the settlement, I believe, is 490 meters per year that we get, and we have this year and next year remaining on that settlement,
And then it's done.
and then it's done.
So another almost 1,000 meters we'll be getting in.
Do we know how many we installed of the bad ones?
You mean the initial installation?
The Pearl and the, yeah.
Are they replacing 100% of the bad ones? And I think
No.
that's what you're getting at.
It was a portion, so that, and again, I gotta say, I don't have, the settlement said we will replace, this portion of your system,
Yeah.
and it was just a number of meters, and we got a certain amount per year.
Like any settlement, neither
Were
party's
you
really.
aware of any of this? I wasn't aware of any of this. The board's not aware of any of this.
It happened before you were on the board. This was when we transitioned to AMR, which was before I was here.
Well, the Pearls went on during my time,
We've had census for 17 years, so it's probably about 17 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So that's.
So these ones that you're gonna do a pilot on, the difference between these ones and the ones that we currently have is that they don't even require somebody to drive around and take the reading. It just provides the reading up into the cloud and
Right.
shoots it back down to you guys.
Just to give a brief, I guess, a summary of the difference. AMI is basically like the web platform, right? So it's web-based, because when you go from manual reading to AMR, you drive around, you get the readings, right? AMI, you can get real-time data. It's on a web platform, you say, okay, I got real reads, you have that information, so leaks are easily detectable, and you just go to that web platform.
And the way it gets that data mostly is you build towers.
Yep.
You may build 2 or 20 towers throughout your district that would have almost line of sight to every meter. And then the meter would just send the data to the tower, and the tower would send it to Tournament Central here.
And so the couple benefits is one, that you don't have to pay somebody to drive around and collect all that data. It just automatically
Oh,
happens.
we'll find another job for
No,
him.
I know. But secondly is that, like Wes just said,
Why
that
you
you get real-time data, so you
Yeah.
can first off let your customers know where their bill is
Well, I think that's
on day
fantastic.
10, day 7, whatever.
I think that's fantastic. And how many people,
However,
what's our return on investment on
there
these
is
things?
a catch, and that you're hitting on it right now. The catch to AMI though is it's very expensive. We estimated $5.3 million last time we looked at converting to AMI,
Right.
and their web platform is not, I'll say, fully developed. So they're working on that part of it. It was more about
Who's they?
Oh, let's start with Census. So we've met with Census and with Neptune to look at AMI first. We actually did this before we ever heard of Capstone.
Okay.
And looking at that, it was like, well, it's this expensive, and Census has a 3-part meter, which is harder to inventory. It's really expensive, and their web platform's not fully developed. So it's us going from AMR to AMI. The real benefit is in the web platform, in the real-time data. And if they don't have that fully developed, it's pointless. So
But is Capstone different than?
yes.
They
and that's why.
they say they are, and that's why we're doing a
That's-
pilot.
yeah,
Prove it
exactly.
to us. Now, so I talked about those towers you have to install. I believe Capstone's a little bit different. They integrate with cellular networks,
Mhm.
so we don't have to go build towers. They put a meter out there, and it just connects to whatever Wi-Fi tower is already out
Oh,
there.
really?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they use.
But it needs line of sight? That doesn't make
Well,
sense.
No,
this one's a
these don't.
radio. Yeah.
These
it's-
don't. So Capstone came out, and I talked to Glenn, and I think both of us were under the impression this might be a waste of our time in the first meeting, and that, just be another salesman giving us information. And we'd already looked into AMI. However, in meeting with them, their technology differs from Census and Neptune. They're web-based system for the most part. They developed their web platform first. They've got apps for all of our customers on the phone that's fully developed, fully functional. And again, this is we haven't started using it yet, but this is what they told us. They showed us the
Did you
web.
get one in your house? Did you get one?
No, they're only 25 meters.
Wait till you hear
Mine's
Flume,
not on it.
you may get one of those.
Yeah,
That's
they
the second
they
one.
get the flume.
Yeah.
So they showed us the web platform, they showed us the app, they gave us a demonstration. The CEO and president of the company actually went through the whole thing with us, and didn't seem like he was really trying to sell us, but the technology was impressive. The meter itself was impressive, and that was not their focus really, which is to us important. So they went through this whole thing, and then they said, plus we can do a pilot program for you that can be 4 to 6 months, no cost, no obligation to the district. We'll install the meters for you, you test them out for that period of time, and you let us know what you think after that. So that being said, we're like, well, if it's no cost, no obligation, we've had our attorneys look over the agreement, and we're actually looking at moving forward with that pilot.
So Wes, does Capstone integrate with our billing system too?
Okay.
We've talked about that, and they've
I'll
actually
get the
teased us in a
Flume.
meeting.
It's
and
literally like a
discussed
log
that.
ride that's gonna go right into my house.
And they believe they can fully integrate with ours.
They'll follow the sewer line down to Grove Road?
Did we lose you guys? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
No, I'm glad that we're looking into it, because I did meet with them too, and a lot of that stuff just over my head, but it sounded like there could be some potential there, so it's
So
worth looking
Capstone
into.
is giving you 25 meters, you're gonna run this thing for 6 months.
Yep.
You get to say where the 25 meters go?
Yes.
Yep.
And
So
we're
you're gonna
gonna-
move them in all the weirdest parts of our
That's
community?
exactly what we did. Gina got involved and said, I hate, that meter never reads, it's hard to get, there's a barking dog there, that road's always closed, so they're gonna put them in those locations, and we're gonna test it out in the worst locations and see if it works.
So
And
part
it's
of
supposed to be real time to the people on their phone, real time here.
real-time resetting the meter.
No,
we can-
but as far
we
as
can
your-
throttle the flow.
As far as your pilot, are we gonna we're gonna give the customers the dashboard and everything,
Maybe, we haven't really decided whether we'll do that.
or are we just trying to figure out first off if?
Proof of concept doesn't work. And,
Yeah.
Yeah. So we gotta figure that out, we'll not
Because
get
really,
into the
what it sounds like right now is you're gonna do this, but the customers may not even know that they're part of the pilot, right?
Right.
Possibly,
Yeah.
yeah.
Aren't you gonna let them know when you install a different meter?
It
No,
would-
we don't always let people know when we
No.
swap meters.
Just go pop
We-
up the cover, put it in?
We may knock on a door to say, hey, your water's gonna be out for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever it takes to swap out a meter, it's pretty quick.
Do we know what the cost would be? Say you like Capstone, what's the cost gonna be?
Yeah.
That's the
Oh,
$64,000 question,
Ta-da!
yeah.
No, so I've asked on several occasions, and one of the challenges with Capstone is going to be that they're a very small company. Their entire stock of meters that's currently in service is 10,000. And their largest customer is 1,000 meters.
So meeting with the president, you're meeting one of 4 people.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
It started.
Sounds impressive, but
It started as a father and son shop. The son actually developed the meter as part of a science project for college or something like that, and they
But
developed.
Google started pretty small too, so you
That's
never
right.
know when you're getting
That's
that
right. You
right
never know.
company, and that's why we're doing this, so.
We've discussed that, if we decide.
So up front, we'd have to pay for all.
Bill Gates started out of the garage.
Yep,
Yeah, well, and it's a lease program that they offer, so it wouldn't be an upfront capital cost like it would be for AMI. Actually, I like it better because then you don't have the $5 million upfront with it and never, like, if you look at solar and you look at what AMI would be, there's no recovery period on that, there's no payback period. Solar's a loser, AMI would be a loser. We would never get the benefit realized from that because of all the costs during the time period. You would have spent it up front and lost it during that time. This way, at least, they're gonna warranty all the meters. So they're gonna send us a stock of meters while we have this program going. They're gonna ensure that the software works during the term of the lease, all that stuff. If the cost is reasonable, I think the lease program is a better way to go, depending on the cost.
And-
we don't have the cost.
and they claim it's revenue neutral, that's the word that their salesperson uses. It won't cost you any more to have this than it costs you for your current program.
Yeah. Well, let's
They
see
gotta
if
prove that
Let's
to
see if they
us.
can deliver.
So we're gonna look at
Yeah.
the
But your current program includes all your labor costs.
labor, meter replacement programs, servicing meters, all that stuff that we do now, that they say there's a way that they'll.
But are you truly gonna get rid of all of your labor?
I don't know. We wanna, they may say, hey, to be revenue neutral, you have to get rid of people. They haven't, we don't know yet. So we're gonna go to the proof of concept, for lack of a better term, through the pilot. And then if we
Okay,
like it,
cool.
then we'll start into discussions about, does this make sense? And if we think it makes sense, we'll probably expand a bigger pilot. And a bigger pilot may be 1,000 meters. It won't be 25 meters, but it probably won't be 22,000
Well,
meters.
this not only you're talking less overhead with people, but less vehicles on the road.
Yeah, and that's probably part of their sales pitch.
Move motorcycles and furniture around.
Well, one thing I like, because I talked to Glenn about
You
it.
don't forget those
I don't
things.
forget anything.
Glenn and I were talking, and I was like, I don't know, 22,000 meters, we'd be their largest customer by like, 21,000 plus or whatever. So I was like, that makes me a little nervous, they're a smaller company. But Glenn made a good point, we don't have to roll out 22,000 meters. We could put 2,000 meters and we'd still be their largest customer. So we could start with 2,000 in our hardest to reach areas, which would definitely help the district and be beneficial.
And they work harder, because if they bust here, they're gonna go bust the company.
That's right.
And we may expand on
So
that.
you gotta fill out, so have you done background checks on these people?
Well,
I mean, you should.
Yeah,
and we're gonna know all that as we go past the pilot, if we can.
Nothing wrong with a student learning something in school, but
well, you're absolutely right. If we entered into a bigger program, we'd be doing the background check, making sure they have the financial
checking
capabilities.
references with the current customer
Yeah.
and all that stuff.
oh yeah,
I do like the fact that they don't have towers, they actually use all the cell phone providers.
That's
So
huge.
if they're in an area which is Sprint strongest, they'll put a Sprint chip in the meter. If they're in an area that's AT&T, Verizon, so on and so forth, and they work with all the cell phone providers, and we don't have to do anything with that, that's all them. So they put that stuff in there, they work in, I think they have Wi-Fi towers in some areas that they maybe maintain, depending on where they get the strongest signal. Their presentation, they said they've got meters in Nebraska that are like 4 feet underground in a cement basement that they're getting signals for. We don't have any conditions, I mean, we have some bad ones, but I don't think we have anything that bad. So hopefully if they can prove what they're saying, it could be exciting.
Yeah,
I would just mention one company that came to the city, and you could ask Rick Denny's about this, 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago. And they said, by using your signal light poles, we'll be able to do Wi-Fi for your entire
yeah.
city. He signed a contract. Didn't pay anything for it, didn't get anything for it either. So it just was a thought.
yeah.
Census wanted us to put up an 80-foot tower at the double peak tank.
Oh, yeah.
So it was like, yeah. and
That would have
it's
looked like a lead balloon.
Yeah,
And we would have had to have several.
Could we
other
have flashing
towers.
lights on top of it too?
that's right.
So it was significant infrastructure costs for looking at
Okay.
AOI,
All right.
which we don't have through the capstone per se.
So I'll cover
Doesn't hurt to
Flume.
look at it.
Yeah.
Flume is another pilot project. It's kind of similar, but it doesn't replace the existing meter. It's a device that straps around an existing meter. It's basically a device that has like a rubber, like it's like a watch band. You put it on your meter. You put a device in your house. The Flume device connects to it's called a wireless bridge in your house that connects to the Wi-Fi, and then the Wi-Fi sends the signals, and then people can have access to their instantaneous data as well as the district can have it. So we're going to be purchasing 20 of those. We're going to start with, we're kind of calling it the friends and family. If there's any district employees that can do it, board members or other people, before we go on a broader thing. The problem with Flume is it does not connect to our billing system. It's only customer service. It tells people, here's your consumption. It'll tell you if it thinks you have a leak.
So it doesn't really give you any sort of cost saving
It's no
benefit.
payback.
It's just basically an added feature for
Yeah.
the customer.
Well, we do it a lot because some people will say, hey, my bill's gone up real high, and we don't have any data to show the continuous usage. So this is something that would give us a real-time look at how their usage pattern is. It could be, I don't think it would ever replace their current meter, but we could do it on a loaner basis. You could take one of these, put it on your meter for a week, take a profile of and if you have constant flow at 2 in the morning, you probably have a leak.
So,
So
but if we went with Capstone, then we wouldn't need Flume, right?
Right. So we
If
have these
Capstone
kind of
works, yeah.
If it
Flume,
works, yeah.
Capstone is potentially much bigger. Flume would never be a replacement for all of our meters. Capstone could be if it pans out.
So this Flume, we would have to send a representative out to attach it to our pipe and to attach it in the house.
No.
You
They-
give it to the person?
Yeah, you give it to them, they come, they check it out, they could buy it. I talked, the city of San Antonio, Texas uses Flume, and they have a program, it's pretty well vetted, I've looked into their stuff, and they have a packet of information, somebody can come in, borrow one, or they can buy it at a discount. Here's the instructions on how to hook it all up, and then it starts working.
How big's the thing in the house?
It's small. It's probably about the size of this. It just looks like another modem. It's like a small modem that you put in your house. So people have to be willing to connect it to their Wi-Fi. Even some employees have said, no thanks, not interested in Big Brother connecting to my Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And I get
Yeah.
that. That's fine. So
How much on it?
About $200 a unit. So interestingly enough, they have some criteria. It only works on metallic bodied meters. A lot of the new meters are plastic, so this won't work because it's an inductive technology. So it has to have a metallic bodied meter. You have to have Wi-Fi. You have to, whatever the criteria were. And if you looked at our 108 employees, only 11 met all the criteria. So I was one of
Oh,
them,
really?
Ed was one of them, and a couple others. And of those 11, only 6 were interested in participating. So when we buy 20, we have 6 here. We can reach out to the board members. Director Hernandez says he'd be interested. I know you don't pay, you don't.
I'm surprised.
You have to be the property owner or the customer of record. That's another thing. So that we have 4 board members if they're interested, and then there may be other people. Mike Steinlet, the GM from Encina, said he'd be interested. He's in our service area, so we can get.
And so this,
Could you put them on commercial use?
You could,
as well?
yeah.
Okay.
so this pilot program though is not completely free. Sounds like we're gonna purchase some to see if there's
$4,000.
something.
Yeah, we're purchasing the 20 times 200. We're buying those, and we're going to deploy them.
Actually,
and
the $4,000, that could be wrong.
yeah, we'll check. Yeah, we're going to buy a
Yeah,
former
yeah,
CFO.
yeah.
We'll yeah, we'll see how it works. I think it's going to end up being just a good customer service tool. It's not going to be something that will replace all of our meters or integrate with our billing system.
Cool. Well, I mean, I don't mind trying it out if my,
Yeah,
everything meets the
We'll check your
stuff.
account. Yeah.
Yeah, check your account. You gonna give it to Hernandez? Check his account?
We'll check his account too.
Check his
So
account.
part of that too is we're looking at.
He probably wants to get paid to be part of the pilot.
Yeah, we're not going to do that. Yeah. Strike that from the record.
You know that's coming, right?
So
You'll sell it.
the flume is just customer side information too, so what we have to do is, as far as this pilot goes, is get some potential agreements with the customer to have access to their data so we can, or at least feedback, so we're looking at meeting next week to talk about how we roll it out and what information we wanna get from it.
That's cool.
Yeah. So we're always looking at these technologies, and 80-90% of the things we look at, we don't do, because the companies aren't everything they claim they were. So,
Cool.
but we'll try 'em.
One thing they mentioned that I don't know if we're clear on is they may have a monthly fee going forward or something in the future.
Yeah,
Which
now
one's
they
this?
don't. It's like a web hosting fee. They may. Flume.
Oh, for
They said it
Flume.
could be.
Yeah.
Their initial thoughts were maybe like $1 a month. Right now it's 0, but it could increase. So. Who knows?
Sounds like if Capstone works, that's our real winner.
Yeah, that would do
Sounds like
everything. It would do everything Flume does and more.
Right.
So if we can get past the small shop sort of issue or challenge, then yes, because there's certain, there are functions of that, like they can throttle back usage, like remotely, we can go on and check your account, be like, oh, you're not paying your bill, you get 25% water. They just throttle it back and then you can do it online.
Really?
We can shut you off online, reactivate
Yeah,
it
that's another
online.
thing too, some people have to shut them
And that's a
down.
huge thing
Big
because
brother.
this Senate Bill 998, you may be somewhat familiar with
Yeah.
it. It's basically
Yeah.
saying how do you treat people that don't pay their water
Right.
bill? Can you shut them off? What the bill doesn't say is it doesn't say you can't throttle them back.
Right.
Our current meters are basically on off. You can't throttle people back. But the Capstone meter, they claim they have the ability that you can set it to 20% of water. You
Wow.
can still fill up the toilet tank. You can still wash your hands and cook, but you're not going to get a nice hot shower out of
Yeah.
it. So.
That was pretty,
That sounds almost like too good to be true.
exactly what I'm thinking, cause I haven't seen the dollar sign yet either, which for me is
Yeah.
kinda key.
And quite honestly, that's why I'd like some of the pilots, if we haven't decided on them all, to be somebody like a staff member or somebody
Yeah.
that we can practice the throttle
yeah.
down. I'm not going to do that with some unknown
Yeah,
person.
exactly.
How's your shower working today?
Yeah, by now.
I won't be able to work today, I can't shower.
Yeah.
Cool, no,
Good
that's,
stuff.
that's very interesting.
So, that's all for today.
Yep,
See you
that's what we
next
had.
month.
Okay, move to adjourn, good stuff.
All right.
Good stuff, thank you very much.